The hum of the engines was steady, like a heartbeat against the metal skin of Flight 827 bound for Washington. DC passengers settled into their seats with the quiet impatience that came from red-eye flight, some scrolling on phones, some lost in their thoughts, others cocooned in headsets and half-dreamed. Near row 14, a woman in a cream silk blouse sat poised, typing quietly on her tablet. Her name was Alicia Warren, and anyone glancing her way might have seen only a calm, self-contained traveler. But Alicia's eyes, sharp and measured, carried the focus of someone used to responsibility, used to being the one people reported to, not the one people dismissed. She had boarded early, polite smile, ready, boarding pass in hand. Not expecting much from this quick connection between Chicago and DC, she had cases, waiting, important ones. As an attorney for the Federal Aviation Administration, her days were often filled with negotiation, regulatory hearings, and long conversations about the fine print that kept the skies safe. But today, she wanted quiet, just a seat by the window, her coffee, and a few hours of peace before tomorrow's conference with top airline executives. The flight attendant approaching from the front, Melissa Carter, was running on fumes. To long-haul flights back-to-back, a delay in Denver, and a crew shortfall had left her frazzled. Her smile was professional but brittle, like something painted on under fluorescent light. As she pushed the beverage cart down the aisle, she caught sight of a man in row 13 cracking jokes with his seatmate, and for a moment her tension softened. Then she reached row 14. "Something to drink?" she asked mechanically. Alicia looked up from her tablet and returned a courteous smile. "Just tea, please. No sugar." Melissa nodded, poured, and handed over the steaming cup. But turbulence caught the plane just as Alicia reached for it. The cup tilted, wobbled, and suddenly hot liquid splattered forward in a chaotic burst. The sound of gasps filled the row as tea hit Alicia's face and blouse, staining the cream fabric a deep amber. Alicia froze for a heartbeat, the sting of heat biting her cheek, and then slowly dabbed at her face with a napkin. Melissa's eyes widened, mortified, but what came next turned the accident into a scene. From the row behind, the laughing man chuckled loudly. "Guess someone needed a wake-up call." His voice carried, mocking. Melissa, caught between embarrassment and pressure, did the worst possible thing. She smirked, trying to play it off lightly in front of the other passengers. "I'm sorry," she said, but her tone was clipped, defensive. "These things happen when you're not paying attention." Alicia's hand paused mid. Her gaze lifted, steady and piercing. Around her, silence grew thick. She could feel the eyes of other passengers on her, waiting for her reaction, half curious, half entertained. She had been in tougher rooms before, courtrooms, board meetings, but
the casual disrespect, the public dismissal, cut differently. She took a breath. "I wasn't the one holding the cup," she said calmly, but her voice carried authority that made a few nearby passengers straighten in their seats. Melissa's face flushed. "Ma'am, I didn't mean—" But Alicia raised a hand. "It's fine, just please bring me a towel." The words were simple, yet something in her tone made Melissa hesitate. The moment dragged awkwardly before the attendant nodded and hurried off. The laughter from behind quieted. The man in row 13 shifted uncomfortably as Alicia cleaned herself up. The warmth of the tea was fading, but the sting of humiliation was not. She dabbed at her collar, watching the amber stain spread like slow-moving fire across her silk. Around her, whispers started. Someone muttered something about how people are too sensitive these days. Another said, "That flight attendant better apologize properly." Alicia ignored them all. Instead, she stared out of the window, watching the clouds move past like waves. Her reflection in the glass looked calm, but her mind was already assembling the facts, just like she would for a case, incident, public setting. Service negligence. Verbal remark. Flight Staff Conduct Code, Section 3.592. She didn't want revenge. She wanted accountability. And she wanted to see whether the airline she was flying on actually upheld the safety and professionalism it promised in every glossy yet unpolished mission statement. By the time the plane reached cruising altitude, Melissa returned, holding a damp towel and a forced smile. "Here you go, ma'am," she said, voice overly sweet as if to reassert control of the situation. It's just tea. It shouldn't leave a mark. Alicia looked at her squarely.
The stain isn't what concerns me.
Melissa blinked. Excuse me? Nothing, Alicia replied smoothly. Please carry on. The attendant hesitated again, thrown off by the composed response, and then moved on down the aisle. Alicia resumed typing, but this time, it wasn't notes for her case. She was drafting an incident report, not as a passenger, as a senior, FAA attorney responsible for flight safety and professional conduct review. She didn't name herself, not yet. That would come later. Behind her, the man who had laughed earlier leaned over to his seatmate. She's really taking that seriously, huh? The seatmate shrugged. She should have just let it go. It's tea. But the woman next to Alicia, a quiet grandmotherly type, whispered softly, People forget how words burn deeper than spills. You handled it right, dear. Alicia smiled faintly. She appreciated the kindness. It reminded her of why she'd joined the FAA years ago, to ensure that dignity and safety meant the same thing at
30,000
feet as they did on the ground. As the flight neared DC, Melissa passed again with her cart, visibly avoiding Alicia's gaze. But this time, Alicia called her over. Melissa, right? The attendant froze mid-step. Yes, ma'am? Alicia's tone was even. I'd like to file a report about the incident. Melissa forced a chuckle. Oh, you don't have to do that. It was an accident. We can give you a free voucher, maybe. I'm not interested in compensation, Alicia interrupted gently. I'm interested in responsibility. The attendant's smile faltered completely. She hesitated, nodding stiffly before hurrying away. When the seatbelt sign lit for a landing, Alicia closed her tablet, the report neatly saved ready to forward. She had no desire to humiliate anyone, but she also knew that systemic respect, especially in aviation, started with moments like this. Small lapses, unchecked, turned into patterns. Patterns turned into culture, and culture determined whether passengers felt like humans or inconveniences. As the wheels touched down, a few passengers clapped softly. Melissa gave her final instructions over the intercom, voice quivering slightly. Alicia gathered her things, calm and quiet, blending into the slow shuffle of disembarking travelers. At the gate, Melissa spotted her again near the terminal doors, surrounded by airline managers greeting arrivals. The flight attendant hesitated, wanting to disappear into the crowd, but it was too late. Alicia was speaking to a man in a dark suit with an FAA badge clipped to his belt. The man nodded gravely as Alicia handed over her tablet. Melissa caught only a few words. Passenger safety code, incident conduct review. Then Alicia turned, meeting Melissa's gaze one last time. Not with anger, but with the calm certainty of someone who would not be dismissed again. The flight attendant felt her throat tighten. She wanted to speak, to apologize properly, but the moment was gone. Alicia walked away through the terminal, her stained blouse a quiet reminder that power doesn't always announce itself loudly. It simply acts when the time is right, and for Flight 827, that time had come. Voice cracked slightly. I was embarrassed. People were watching. I thought if I joked it off, it would make it less awkward. Alicia nodded. I understand that. But when we're in uniform, whether as flight crew or government officials, our composure under pressure defines trust. Passengers remembered tone more than temperature. Melissa's eyes glistened. She hadn't expected compassion, and that made it worse somehow. I didn't know who you were, she whispered. That's the point, Alicia said gently. Respect shouldn't depend on recognition. The silence that followed was thick but healing. Alicia didn't push for punishment. Instead, she proposed something else. Retraining, she said. Not just for Melissa, but as part of a larger culture audit. Cabin crews deal with unimaginable stress. They need better emotional support systems, not just disciplinary threats. The manager blinked. You're suggesting we revise the entire service protocol? Alicia nodded. I'm suggesting you humanize it. Within weeks, the airline launched what became known as the Courtesy Altitude Initiative, a company-wide reform program designed to retrain flight staff on communication, empathy, and crisis response. Melissa became one of the first volunteers for the pilot program. She learned not just to serve, but to listen, to de-escalate without diminishing passengers' dignity. Months passed. One spring morning, Alicia boarded another flight, this time as a quiet passenger again, anonymous, reading a document, sipping tea from a paper cup. The flight attendant serving her smiled warmly and said, Please be careful, it's hot. Alicia smiled back. Midway through the flight, the captain made an announcement over the intercom. We'd like to thank our crew today for participating in the Courtesy in Altitude program, a partnership with the FAA to improve passenger experience. A few passengers clapped softly. Alicia's smile deepened. She hadn't wanted credit, and she didn't get any. But that was fine. Change didn't need applause, it just needed endurance. As the plane descended through soft golden clouds, Alicia gazed out the window, her reflection overlapping with the sky beyond. She thought about how easily respect could be lost, and how powerful it was when reclaimed. When the wheels touched down, she closed her tablet and whispered to herself, "A dignity is the highest altitude." Outside, the sun hit the tarmac like liquid gold. People disembarked one by one, unaware that a quiet revolution in airline ethics had started because of a single cup of tea and a woman who refused to respond with rage when justice would do. As she walked through the terminal, her phone buzzed. A message from her assistant. "Your story's trending internally at FAO. People are saying it's inspiring. You should share it publicly." Alicia typed back, "Maybe one day. For now, let's keep flying higher." Then, as she stepped into the sunlight beyond the gate, the world around her seemed just a morning sunlight spilled across the glass facade of the Federal Aviation Administration headquarters in Washington, D.C., glinting off rows of polished metal letters that read, U.S. Department of Transportation. Inside, the corridors hummed with quiet authority, shoes clicking on marble, low voices trading updates, the steady rhythm of people who carried the weight of aviation safety on their shoulders. In a small conference room on the 10th floor, Alicia Warren stood before a panel of 3 senior investigators. She had submitted her report the same night she landed, not out of emotion but principle. She hadn't expected it to escalate so quickly, yet within 24 hours, her name had triggered attention. She was known here, one of the youngest attorneys to oversee safety conduct, cases for major airlines. When she filed something, people listened. The lead investigator, Samuel Ortega, adjusted his glasses. "Miss Warren, I have to say, when we first saw your name attached to this, we assumed it was in your professional capacity. We didn't realize you were the passenger involved." Alicia nodded calmly. "I hesitated before submitting it, but I wanted it reviewed impartially, not because of who I am, but because of what it represents." Samuel leaned back. A routine service mishap on the surface, but your report noted improper conduct, verbal attitude, and lack of follow-up. "It's not about spilled tea," Alicia said softly. "It's about what happens when someone in uniform forgets that. Authority without empathy is just arrogance in disguise." The room fell quiet. Alicia wasn't angry anymore. She was deliberate. Her words carried the same power she'd learned from years in courtrooms. Steady, measured, undeniable. 2 days later, the airline received notice of an internal review. The flight attendant, Melissa Carter, was called in. When she saw the memo header, Professional Conduct Evaluation, her stomach sank.
She had been through rough days before, but this one felt different.
She remembered the woman she'd spilled tea on, the one with the calm, piercing eyes. She hadn't realized who she was, but now, reading the report, she knew. The meeting took place at the airline's operations center, a sterile room with gray walls and the faint hum of air conditioning. A corporate manager sat across from her. Next to him, an FAA observer, Alicia. Melissa's breath caught when she saw her. Alicia's blouse was crisp white today, her ID badge gleaming under the light. But her expression wasn't vengeful. It was composed, even kind. "Ms. Carter," the manager began, "you've been with the airline for 7 years. You've served thousands of passengers without issue. But this report raises serious concerns." Melissa clasped her hands. "It was an accident," she said quietly. "I didn't mean to spill the tea, and I did apologize." Alicia spoke softly, interrupting her. "You apologized for the spill, but not for how you handled it afterward." Melissa's